Hey folks, I'm Jay Srinivasan. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Stitchflow. And today I'm going to talk about the disconnected app problem that modern organizations face. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Stitchflow. Stitchflow is a little over 2.5 years old, and the team and I, we come from Okta. We've been in and around identity, SaaS management, and IT service management for around a decade now. And a lot of what I take you, a lot of what I'm going to take you through is based on our learnings over the last several years. So, where I'm going to start is by actually telling you about the two different environments that every company has on the IT side. There's one side of the house, which is what we call the connected or automated world. Simple way to think about this is you have an identity provider like Okta or Active Directory or OneLogin or Jump Cloud, and the tools that connect through Okta, so single sign-on through Okta, as well as when someone joins or leaves your company, folks are automatically provisioned or deprovisioned. That's the skim part. That is the connected and automated world. And the thing about this environment is it tends to be secured and optimized. On the other hand, you have another IT environment, which is what we call the disconnected or manually managed environment. And the simplest definition here is these are all the applications that are not automatically managed when someone joins or leaves the company. Someone in IT needs to manually deal with these tools, either for provisioning or audit or for security or for finance in terms of things like renewals. And there are a variety of reasons why applications are disconnected or manually managed. And you'll see the list I have here is some of those. The most common tend to be that the tools simply don't even have SSO, SAML, or SCIM with the identity provider that you're using. The tool simply doesn't provide that capability. Or every vendor loves to charge the SSO tax. So you have Okta, but you need to pay an additional $20 per user per month to put this application behind Okta from a single sign-on perspective or from a provisioning perspective. So the first and probably most common reason applications are disconnected or manually managed has to do with SSO SCIM is simply unavailable or it's too expensive. But there are a variety of other reasons as well. For example, there's some tools that are either very old or very new that don't even have APIs or don't even have user management endpoints. It could be that the tools that you are using, even if they have APIs and endpoints, they are being used in such a way that the access policies are too complex to automate. Or you might have multiple email domains. For example, you're a company that acquired another company, and some of your employees are on one email domain, and then the other set of employees are on another email domain. Or you might have started off with something like Google or Active Directory, but then migrated to Okta, so you're dealing with multiple IDPs. These are all situations in which applications are disconnected or manually managed. Same thing applies for people as well. We see often your employees are going through your identity provider like Okta, but contractors or external users are not. And then there are disconnected users. And then, of course, the long tail of everything else. I have on-prem tools. I have homegrown apps. I have legacy apps. So fundamentally, there are two environments. There's a connected, automated world. And then for a variety of reasons, you have a disconnected or manually managed world. Now, the main point that I want to make is the risk to your IT organization is from the disconnected apps. Because when something is connected, when something is automated, you have access policies that are implemented in an automated fashion. There tend to almost never be ex-employees that still have access to the tool because once you remove them from your identity provider or suspend them in your identity provider, they are automatically removed from all the connected tools. And these tools tend to be way easier to audit as well during audit season or during renewals. So that's the good news, right? The connected stuff is optimized. You don't have to spend too much time thinking about it. On the other hand, all of your risk falls in the disconnected app space, where you basically are dealing with three primary types of risk when it has to do with these disconnected applications. The first and probably most worrisome is what we call orphaned accounts. Simply put, somebody who is no longer with your organization, an employee or a contractor, still has lingering access to a tool because they were not removed. It's not automated as part of the manual process. That tool was missed or that ex-employee was missed. They still have lingering access. This is the canonical example of a salesperson leaving your organization and still having access to your Salesforce at their new company. Another bucket of risk in disconnected applications is what we call hidden accounts. An orphaned account is when there's an ex-employee that you know of that still has access. A hidden account is an account that you don't even know about. They're not part of your identity provider. They're not part of your HRIS. Somebody essentially sideloaded a user, for example, a contractor or someone, into a system, and you're not even aware of that. Those are what we call hidden accounts. And then finally, unused accounts. Since these disconnected tools are not being automatically managed, you're in a situation where you're paying more for licenses than you need to, because when something is underutilized, there's not a clean, easy way to actually remove access. And the renewals tend to be incredibly painful as well. Because auditing of these tools is hard, your renewals are inefficient. So this is sort of the summary of how I think of risks for connected as well as disconnected applications. And when I look at our customers at Stitchflow, the data bears out this statement as well. So what you're seeing on this slide, when you look at these three categories of risk: orphaned accounts, hidden accounts, and underutilized accounts, across connected or automated applications, the number of gaps that we find when we audit someone's environment tends to be incredibly low. Less than 5. The unit here is incidents per 100 employees. So if I have 1,000 employees, they're going to be less than 50 orphaned accounts. They're going to be less than 50 hidden accounts. Underutilized licenses are a little harder to manage, but even then, it's still under control. It's less than 250 or so. On the other hand, in these exact same organizations, when you look at their disconnected applications, we're talking about, for every 100 employees, there are 25 incidents of access still lingering. There are 40 incidents of hidden accounts that you weren't even aware of. I was talking to a customer yesterday. They mentioned a situation in their past where they audited a tool that was disconnected. A 300-person company found 900 hidden accounts. And then finally, underutilized licenses tend to blow up in these tools as well. So the big takeaway here, simply put, you have two environments: a connected environment and a disconnected environment. And the number of gaps you're going to have to deal with, the number of risk elements from a security perspective, from a compliance perspective, from a finance perspective, is exponentially higher on the disconnected side. And by the way, disconnected apps don't have to be some obscure corner app that no one's ever heard of. The most common disconnected apps that we find in our environments are tools like Salesforce, tools like Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence, Adobe, Shopify, Figma, Asana. These aren't just niche on-prem legacy tools. The most popular, biggest, most commonly used SaaS apps can absolutely be disconnected as well if they're not gated behind your identity provider. Now, here's the thing. This is a sort of generic statement around connected apps and disconnected apps, but it actually impacts several different parts of your organization. First, starting at the top left, is IT. And at the end of the day, the burden to manage disconnected applications falls squarely on IT, where the simple premise here is, if I have disconnected applications, I need to devote manual IT work on a daily, weekly, quarterly, and annual basis just to manage disconnected applications. What automation is supposed to do, where you provision someone, deprovision someone, instead, for every few hundred employees, you need to devote one IT person to just manually deal with these apps. And the implication here, most IT teams are incredibly strapped for resources. You have no time for strategic work because you're just treading water managing disconnected applications. So the first sort of primary impact is on IT teams. Equally painful, though, is compliance and GRC, where as you're going through any sort of audit, SOC 2, ISO, PCI, SOX, when it comes to connected applications, the audits tend to be fairly quick. You know the environments are clean, you're able to get evidence very, very quickly. On the other hand, For disconnected applications, it's all about living in spreadsheets and constantly finding gaps that need to then be corrected. So it's a huge manual burden for compliance teams, and it's a huge reason for certification delays. It's not just IT and compliance, though, it's also finance and security. For finance, going back to the previous slide where you saw that the number of underutilized licenses and disconnected apps is more than 5x what you see in connected apps, that directly is a finance issue because you're now paying for licenses that aren't being used, and and your renewals are inefficient, which means you're getting locked in for another year at an inefficient rate. You're also, if you have to go do SSO and SCIM for every tool, the SSO tax is real. That hits finance as well. And then finally, for security, orphaned account risk, or essentially a breach vector, which is ex-employees that still have access to tools, is the cause of more than half of all security incidents in companies as well. So disconnected applications are a problem, and they impact every different group here: IT, compliance, finance, and security. I think the most interesting current thing that is making this worse, though, is Gen AI tools. And so obviously everyone is familiar with ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, but also the host of new tools that are now using Gen AI. And every CEO is on Twitter listening to Toby Lutke at Shopify or Aaron Levy at Box, and they're mandating that AI is a strategic priority in their company. They want everyone in their every CEO wants everyone in their organization to adopt AI because it makes them more productive. That is fantastic. The problem, though, is IT then can't block innovation. You can't police. You can't police these new Gen AI tools. And the stat here, over the last year, the use of Gen AI tools grew 239% year on year versus just 15% for traditional business software that wasn't Gen AI. So unprecedented rate of Gen AI tool adoption within companies. The challenge here, though, is that these companies are so new, these tools are so new, they don't have enterprise security standards that work with your IDP. So if you're using Okta and someone in marketing has discovered a new fantastic Gen AI tool that's going to help them do fantastic outbound marketing, that's great. However, that tool is connecting to your CRM and it's not gated behind Okta simply because that tool doesn't have the capabilities. And so 89% of Gen AI tools that are being adopted in the enterprise right now don't offer SAML or SCIM. So disconnected apps is a problem. It impacts everybody in your company, and it's only going to get significantly worse because of Gen AI. So this is the problem space that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to talk about how to solve for it. Now, here is my fundamental belief about disconnected applications, which actually differs from how a lot of organizations deal with disconnected applications. Most people try to automate as much as they can. They try to mandate SSO and SCIM, and then that's their connected automated environment. Everything else that's disconnected, they deal with manually, but they live with. My point is, if there is a critical app in your company, a tier one app in your company, something that's used by marketing or sales or customer success or engineering in your company that's disconnected, that is fundamentally a problem. My strong belief is that the only solution for disconnected critical apps is 100% coverage. And the analogy that I like to use is a house. Let's say you build a house, the house has 10 doors. 6 of those doors have fantastic locks. They have bad scanners, everything. They are very, very secure. Those are the connected applications behind your IDP. But then you have 4 other doors in your house that have no lock at all. Does that make your house safe? It doesn't. And that's the same way I think about disconnected applications. There's no point trying to be perfect for 6 of your doors if 4 of your doors are wide open. And the same thing applies for connected and disconnected applications when an application is critical. So my simple take here is you have to stop chasing perfection, trying to automate everything, because it's not possible. These tools don't allow you to do that. And don't do that at the cost of actually being secure. 100% automation is not possible. However, I'm going to show you that 100% coverage is. And that is the fundamental philosophy behind how Stitchflow approaches disconnected applications. So what do you have to do and I'm just going to sort of highlight the pain involved in actually dealing with disconnected applications if you're trying to be 100% secure. So, for example, let's say in your environment, you're not willing to pay the $30 per user per month to put Salesforce behind Okta. And someone says, "Hey, IT, I'm sure you got it. What's so hard about this? Just go audit these tools constantly." Their expectation is, "Oh, you have Salesforce, you need to go audit it manually. How hard can it be? It'll take 5 minutes." When in reality, you know that the actual process to audit a disconnected application looks like what you see on the right. You need to go back and forth with HR. You need to go back and forth with app owners. You need to go to your IDP. You got to download a bunch of spreadsheets. You then got to figure out who should have access, who shouldn't have access from a groups and roles perspective. You need to figure out which accounts are in your IDP, but not in these tools, which accounts are in these tools, not in your IDP, which accounts are suspended in your IDP, but in these tools. You need to take out all the exceptions, the special projects, the legal holds. You need to figure out what are service accounts, remove those. You need to figure out which contractors are real versus which contractors are not. It is a lot of work. So the expectation that an external team in your company might have about the ease of auditing a tool does not bear reality to what IT actually deals with. And so you have to get to 100% coverage. But the simple answer is the manual approach is incredibly hard. And unfortunately, there aren't that many other effective alternatives for disconnected applications. We just talked about manual spreadsheet work. The problem is it's manual. It's a ton of work. It's error prone. It's cumbersome, and it's simply not scalable. Either as your company grows or the number of disconnected applications grow, it doesn't scale. Our simple math here is for every 1,000 employees, 2 people in IT full-time job is just dealing with provisioning, deprovisioning, and auditing of disconnected applications. That's just a simple tax that you're going to have to pay. So that's on the manual side. The other alternatives that exist today tend to either fall in the identity space, the workflow space, or traditional SaaS management. And these are incredibly effective tools, but the problem is they stop where the APIs end. So if you have tools that have APIs, you could set up a workflow. If you have a tool that doesn't have an API or you don't have access to the API, whether you're using a SaaS management solution, whether you're using an identity provider, whether you're using a workflow tool, you're stuck because those apps are going to be disconnected and it falls back on manual. And so this leads me to how Stitchflow thinks about this problem. We're taking a fundamentally different approach to the disconnected app space, where our North Star, our primary goal is to stitch together your connected environment and your disconnected environment. Our number one target in any organization that we serve is 100% coverage of your disconnected and connected apps and users. That's where we start with. That's what we achieve. What we do, we unify visibility across your identity provider, across your connected applications, and your disconnected applications into a single pane of glass. We help you continuously find and fix orphaned accounts, hidden users, and unused licenses across your environment. And all this for incredibly busy IT teams is a done for you service that requires minimal setup and zero maintenance. So again, this is Stitchflow and how we think about the disconnected app problem. And for the rest of this webinar, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking through Stitchflow, showing you the product, and going through a few case studies as well. But again, our North Star is the 100% coverage. We start there. So the first question is, how do we actually do this? And this is sort of the most important slide in this deck as it relates to Stitchflow. This is the heart of our technology. Essentially, what we're doing, starting on the left, is for your IT environment. So Google, Office 365, Okta, Active Directory, OneLogin, Jump Cloud, your HR data. All these tools tend to have pretty robust APIs. And so we connect to those tools through API. Then you have a group of applications in your organization that do have APIs. These are tools like Salesforce, Zoom, Atlassian. And then you have everything else, all of the apps that don't have APIs. So what Stitchflow does is it connects to your IT environment through API. It connects to all of your API accessible SaaS tools where there are user management endpoint API endpoints available. But the key difference between Stitchflow and any other solution is we're also able to stitch together CSVs from every other tool. And so what we do is we connect to your IT environment, we connect to your API available applications. For everything else, we're essentially getting some representation of users, usage, roles, permissions through CSV. And then we bring all of this data into a data warehouse, but most importantly, we stitch it together into a graph. We basically relate the users in your identity provider with your API accessible apps as well as your CSV based apps. We stitch together devices, we stitch together groups. So we're taking all of this data, putting it into a data warehouse, and then stitching it together. What this allows us to do then is essentially query all of your connected IT data across disconnected apps and connected apps. And so essentially, we're able to join all of your IT data. We're able to filter all of your IT data. And based on that, Stitchflow is automatically able to find hidden accounts, orphaned accounts, and unused accounts in your environment. Now, oh, and by the way, I see some questions that are coming up. This is great. I'm going to actually, if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to just quickly go through my slides, and then I'll just work through all of the Q&A at the end. But thank you so much for these questions. Keep them coming. So this is the heart of Stitchflow. Essentially, the crux of the product is we stitch together your IT environment data. We stitch together API accessible data from the applications that do have APIs. For everything else, we find some representation of the user data that is stitched together as a CSV into a graph that can be joined, filtered, and queried to find hidden accounts. For example, a user that's active in Salesforce, but not even in Google. An orphaned account, for example, a user that's active in Asana, but deactivated in Okta, as well as unused accounts. For example, people that haven't edited anything in Figma for 90 days that probably don't need a Figma editor license. So this is the crux of Stitchflow. Now, this IT graph sits in the context of a done-for-you service model. So starting at the top right, the number one thing that we're very good at is knowing application by application what data to pull, as well as connecting through that API or automating collection of your information through CSV. So step one, Stitchflow is connecting to all of your applications, either through API or CSV, and automating that. And so you have your data in the Stitchflow IT graph. Then going to the bottom right, what Stitchflow is doing is automatically accurate to your organization, understanding all of the nuance of your organization, understanding who's a contractor, who's a full-time employee, dealing with multiple email domains, all of that, Stitchflow is able to handle all of your unique organizational nuance and complexity. And for every application, connected or disconnected, it's constantly scanning for orphaned, hidden, or unused accounts. And when there are gaps, you get alerted on those. Those alerts can be remediated directly in Stitchflow, or Stitchflow will create a ticket in your ticketing system. So this is the crux of the product. We stitch together all of your data, keep it up to date, constantly audit every single application. If anything is orphaned, hidden, or unused, you get alerted, and then you can remediate that in Stitchflow or through your ticketing system. This is all stitched together into a single hub where you have a centralized view of all of your managed apps, your business data, your access policies, your contract information. And Stitchflow is also helping you proactively find new apps to manage by scanning for shadow IT and then scoring new applications in your environment for usage as well as AI risk. So the idea here is, as a whole, we're finding everything that you need to be managing. We're making sure the data is up to date for each of those things. If there's any gap, you're alerted on it and you're fixing it. And you have a central hub where you're viewing all of your data. This is Stitchflow in a nutshell. Now, what I'm going to do is just very quickly show you a quick demo of the product, just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to start with this view, which is what we call our insights view. But simply put, this is the answer page. This is every gap in your environment. And so you'll see here, for all of the different tools that are connected to this Stitchflow instance, and you'll see that in this case, I have something like 30, 40 different tools, very common tools, et cetera. What Stitchflow is doing is constantly looking for orphaned, hidden, or unused accounts. So for example, this account, which is active in Salesforce, not in Google, is what we call a hidden account. Stitchflow has found 3 of those in Salesforce. Or Stitchflow has found 13 people in Asana that have been deactivated in Okta. Those are orphaned accounts. And then for tools like Figma or Salesforce, where usage information is available, Stitchflow is also giving you visibility into who is not using those tools. Now, you see that we're doing this for every tool in your environment, and all of the gaps are being highlighted. Our goal is to get everything to be green, no outliers detected. So all of these are clean tools without any orphaned, hidden, or unused accounts. For the tools that do have gaps, where the tool provides the ability to take an action, you can run that action directly in Stitchflow. Or Stitchflow is basically creating tickets directly in your ticketing system. So this is the answer page. This is your environment. If everything here is taken care of, your environment is clean without any manual work. Compliance has what they need. Security is happy. Finance is happy. Now, how Stitchflow is able to generate this information is based on our IT graph. And so what I'm going to do here is very, very quickly show you what I mean by that. So the first thing that Stitchflow does is we connect to all of your data. And you'll see that there are a bunch of tools like Entra ID or Slack or Google Workspace, Monday.com, et cetera, that are connected through API. So if the API is available, Stitchflow syncs with that API and keeps it up to date. But you'll see that there are some tools like Figma or Adobe or Loom where it's more effective to connect to these tools through CSV. So step one, Stitchflow is connecting to all of your different tools, starting with your IT environment, but API accessible tools, and then everything else through CSV. And what Stitchflow is doing is it's stitching all this together into a graph. Now, the core construct of Stitchflow is a concept called a board. A board in Stitchflow is fields across tools stitched together and filtered to answer a question. So I'm going to show you. So what you see here are insights that are backed by boards. And these boards are automatically created on a tool by tool basis for you. What I'm going to do is actually manually create a board just to show you how the Stitchflow IT graph works. So for example, in this Stitchflow demo instance, what you see on the right here is every field from every tool with which I can create a board. And so, for example, we are a Google shop. So if I want to see all my Google users, all I have to do is click users in Google, and I now have a full list of everyone at Stitchflow. Now, if I'm looking for orphaned accounts in my Google environment, all I have to do with Stitchflow, and Stitchflow does this automatically, but I'm doing it manually for you. All I have to do with Stitchflow is join org units and suspension status. And what that gives me instantly is the ability to see all of my users, their org units, their suspension status, filter out service accounts, filter in suspended status as true, and I instantly have an accurate view of ex-employees. Now, what I can then do if I'm looking for orphaned accounts is instantaneously join this against user records from tools that are connected, like Kanji or Zoom, or let's take one more, or Slack, but also from disconnected applications like Figma or Loom, or Asana or Loom or Calendly. So this is one example of how Stitchflow works. But what I've instantly done, literally in like 10 clicks, is scan my entire IT environment, found ex-employees in Stitchflow, and I can instantly see that they're good on Kanji. We still have a user in Slack. These are through API. And then we have a Figma account, a Loom account, and a Calendly account that needs to be cleaned up. And then if there's an action available in any tool, you can run that directly in Stitchflow as well. This is the crux of Stitchflow. Basically, all of your IT data stitched together, filtered to perfectly represent your organization, and then address a question. So now, when I go back to the insights that Stitchflow is automatically creating for your organization, the source of these insights, each of these insights is backed by a board. So for example, if I'm looking for active in Salesforce, not in Google, what that is in reality is a board which has the appropriate filters auto-generated for your environment. That is how Stitchflow accurately represents your organization and finds the gaps. I'm just going to show you one more example. Let's talk about Figma in this case, and let's create the board around licenses that aren't being used. Because we've created the data pipelines for each of our tools, we can add any endpoints. And so, for example, when we're doing things like usage, we actually get incredibly detailed. For Figma, for example, we're looking for last edit in Figma, we're looking for last edit in FigJam, and last edit in Slides. In the case of something like Zoom, we're looking for Zoom license type, we're looking for last login, we're even looking to see if users are hosting meetings greater than 40 minutes based on meetings hosted and length of those meetings. All of that is the information that we're then able to use to provide you with an insight on whether a license is being used or not. So this is the crux of Stitchflow in terms of the core IT graph and how it finds all of the gaps for you. This sits in the context of a broader view of all of your managed applications, where Stitchflow has your contract information, it has your business owners, it has, for example, your access policies for Adobe in plain text. This is what Stitchflow is then using to figure out what is a violation of access policy, what is a gap, what is not. So that's the high-level overview of Stitchflow that I just wanted to very quickly show you on this webinar. Let me switch back to my slides. I have a few more that I want to go through. The first is just talking a little bit about our customers. Spot On is one of our customers, and they are a very common sort of archetype of organization that we serve. Incredibly successful company, 2,000 plus employees. And as you'd imagine, in an environment like this, they have hundreds of apps, but not all of these apps actually sit behind Okta. Not all these apps actually sit behind Google Workspace. Not all these apps actually sit behind Active Directory. So imagine the situation where this IT team is dealing with 2,000 plus applications, 2,000 plus employees across hundreds of applications, including disconnected applications. It's an incredibly manual process. And so what the situation that Spot On had when we first started working with them, they had a huge amount of manual time spent manually auditing these disconnected applications. They had security gaps, they had compliance issues, and renewals of their software were an absolute nightmare, involving spreadsheets and a ton of work. What Stitchflow was able to do was stitch together all of their IT environment data, stitch together all of their connected app data, stitch together all of their disconnected app data, give constant visibility across all of this in a single pane of glass, automatically find any gaps such that they've been able to free up 2 full heads of IT, of their IT team. Like literally their IT team has 2 additional heads that were previously just locked up in these managed apps, in these disconnected apps. They're now focused on strategic activities. Their annual contract renewals for certain tools have reduced from a 2-week spreadsheet exercise to a 15-minute review of a Stitchflow board to say, hey, yep, this looks good. Let's go renew this license. We know it's optimized. They closed a ton of security gaps. And as it always happens with disconnected applications, Stitchflow finds money for you as well, such that in the case of Spot On, they were able to save more than $160,000 in just the first month with Stitchflow. Taking a broader step back, as we look across our different companies, the types of orgs where we really help. One, organizations like Spot On. You're scaling, access policies are established or not quite established, and everything is just a little bit messy. Those environments have gaps. Those environments tend to not be fully automated. We serve those incredibly well. There's another class of organization which has legacy tech. For example, we work with an extremely well-known mattress retailer, which has been around for nearly 20 years. And in a company that's been around for 20 years, some of their systems still run on legacy tools, if not even mainframes. How do you do disconnected application audits of those apps? Stitchflow helps with those. And so forget about SAML and SCIM with your IDP. These are situations where you don't even have that. So we tend to do great in organizations that have legacy tech. We have another customer, Touring, which has an outsized number of contractors that they work with. They have a lot of contractors. Contractors tend to join and leave much more frequently than traditional employees. And not all these contractors are going through their primary IDP with full access to everything. Stitchflow completely helps optimize for that. And then we also serve customers that are multi-domain. For example, Strata Education Network one of our customers, is actually 8 companies stitched together into one. And what Stitchflow is able to do is essentially find all of the duplicate accounts across different domains, et cetera, automatically for them. So I have one last slide, which is, if any of this speaks to you, if this is relevant, I would strongly urge you to talk to us. And what we'll do is we'll give you a free audit of your IT environment. And to demonstrate not only Stitchflow's capabilities, but our done for you model, the total time commitment on your side is a 30-minute call where you connect your identity provider, your connected apps, as well as your disconnected apps. And then over the course of 4 weeks, what we'll do for less than 4 hours of your time, we'll fully audit your IT environment, find all the gaps in your IT environment, help you remediate those, and quantify the impact of the security, compliance, and cost gaps that you've fixed. So if you have any interest in that, please do reach out to us. We would love to do a more full-fledged demo and then do a free IT audit of your environment. And so, folks, that is primarily what I wanted to talk about. Just sort of recapping, our whole point is this. If I could show one slide to end this call, end this webinar, it's this slide. Disconnected apps are real. Every environment has them. With Gen AI, it's going to get worse. And your solution cannot be, I need to automate everything, because it's not your automation capabilities, it's what these apps don't have. And so don't chase perfection with automation, leaving all these disconnected apps that are critical. You need to think about 100% coverage as well. And so that is the primary point that I want to make on today's webinar. Awesome. While I was going through this, I saw that a few questions came in. So let me just quickly walk through those, and please feel free to add any other questions. But right now, let me just quickly go through each of these questions and quickly answer them. So the first question: how does Stitchflow work without needing enterprise plans? For example, in tools like Slack. It's really interesting. So first of all, Stitchflow works with APIs as well as without APIs. Now, if you're trying to do SAML and SCIM with an identity provider like Okta, you have no choice. You have to pay the SSO tax for any given application. With something like Atlassian, you have to pay $4 or $8 per user per month to use Atlassian Guard to make that work, to make Atlassian work with Okta. For something like Figma, you have to be on their most advanced plan. With Stitchflow, or with Slack, the example that in the question, you have to pay for their enterprise grid offering. In the case of Stitchflow, we are able, if the tool has an API, we're able to access that API even without you paying for the most advanced plan. So for example, in the case of Atlassian, even the base plan without Atlassian Guard has robust API access. Stitchflow is not relying on the SSO tax. We're basically relying on the API. So in the case of tools like Slack, the API is robust without you having to pay for enterprise grid. In the case of Atlassian, the API is robust without you having to pay for Atlassian Guard. Stitchflow uses that, and we save you the SSO tax for those applications, and you get the same audit, orphaned, hidden, and unused license capabilities. For tools that don't have APIs, or the API is completely locked unless you're on the most advanced plan, we fall back on CSVs. So again, our goal is 100% coverage. Where there's an API that is part of your plan, and that's quite common for a lot of popular apps, we sync with that. Where there's no API, no worries, we cover those as well. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have a tool that has an API, but it doesn't include user management. Would Stitchflow still help? That's actually a great question. Actually, my favorite example of that is Figma. Most Figma plans have access to an API, but that API does not actually have a very useful user management, doesn't have useful user management capabilities. So for example, in the case of Figma, we automate collection of a CSV from the admin page, which is actually a much more effective way to deal with orphaned, hidden, and unused accounts in Figma. So the quick answer to your question: if it doesn't have user management, might as well not have an API for the purposes of what we're doing here. And Stitchflow falls back on the CSV-based approach. Next question: does Stitchflow only pull user lists or also logs of the tools? So our goal is to create an IT graph of your users, their usage of different tools, groups, roles, permissions, teams. And so endpoints that relate to those capabilities in any given API or in a CSV where we're focused on users, usage, manager, department, roles, groups, teams, channels. We sync that information. What we don't sync, though, is live streaming audit logs. And this is purely a function of what we're trying to optimize for, which is user management, provisioning, deprovisioning, SaaS management. I think the answer to your question is we are only providing, we pull the user list. It's not just the users, but it's all the metadata around the users in terms of their role, department, usage, et cetera. But we do not pull audit logs. For that, you would need some other type of Datadog Splunk type solution where you're doing something else with that. Okay, next question. Do you do access certifications? So I used to be the product lead for Okta Identity Governance, and I can assure you that getting to automated access certifications across disconnected applications is absolutely on Stitchflow's roadmap. It's something that we want to do. Today, Stitchflow gives you access visibility. So as you're doing your access audits, what Stitchflow will do is give you all the information without you having to do any manual work for the disconnected applications. However, specifically in terms of access certifications, where, for example, there's an automated flow where a manager of an employee with access to an app gets a notification that says, should this person have access? We do not do that today. It is something that we intend to do. It's a critical part of our roadmap. We want to be the access certification solution for disconnected apps. But today, we stop at access visibility. All right. And then I think there's one more question. Is Stitchflow able to find apps that employees use and we don't know about, like Shadow IT? Yes, with the caveat. So our philosophy around Shadow IT is this. There's no point boiling the ocean when and finding all 2,500 applications that are being used in a company if you're not going to do anything with that information. Instead, what Stitchflow does is we basically find all access to any Shadow IT through an employee's corporate email account, either in Google Workspace or Office 365. So if someone has logged into something, we will help you find that if they've done so with their corporate email account. Then going back to this slide with this loop, we discover these apps and then help you prioritize these identified apps by the number of users as well as their AI risk. What is their data and privacy model? What are the certifications for the vendor? What type of data is being pasted into these Gen AI tools, et cetera? We're basically scoring all of your Shadow IT identified through corporate email for usage as well as AI risk, with the goal of then figuring out what needs to be managed, connecting that application, and then optimizing it. The question of, do we cover Shadow IT, for example, based on people expensing software in their finance system, or if someone is logging into a tool with a personal email address instead of their corporate email address? Stitchflow does not find that today. We will be adding more robust Shadow IT capabilities over time. But what we found consistently is just dealing with even Shadow IT through your corporate email account overwhelms most IT teams. And so it's critical to start there and prioritize it down. And I think that's the last question. We're also at the 45-minute mark. So unless anyone has any other questions, I want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you so much. Again, we're passionate about identity. We're passionate about IT teams. We're passionate about giving IT teams their time back. And in particular, disconnected apps are a huge source of pain for IT teams. And it is our mission to make that easier. So if this is something that you want to talk about, you want to learn more, you want a free audit of your IT environment, please do reach out to us. Thank you.